right, thank you. Next, I want to welcome our panel number 2, Breaking the Norm, the unspoken rules, stereotypes, and policies that dictate and influence professional and economic growth. This panel is moderated by the lovely Luz Mena. Thank you, Luz. Luz, please say a couple words about yourself, and then panelists, I'm sure you've seen how the evenings go. If you could introduce yourself, say a couple words, and then we'll jump right into the questions. Thanks.
Hello. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Luz Mena. I'm a geographer, and I'm also a dancer. And somebody made fun of that combination this morning, saying, do you dance on top of maps? And my answer is no, I dance the maps. They both have to do with organizing space in a meaningful way. And today I am delighted to moderate this very interesting panel on normalization of society, the type of stereotypes that might limit our participation, both economic, social, and otherwise. This is one subject that fascinates me as a cultural geographer, the fact that what we call modern life, modern era, which roughly starts in the 19th century after the Industrial Revolution, is characterized by the fact that we've normalized life. That means that we have come up with ideas that we consider rules and values and principles that make society more easily governed, that makes society more efficient, more orderly, like a machine. And after all this time, we have come to believe that those ideas are something like God-given values, even moral and religious principles. But they're not. These ideas were put together, were gradually accepted in a very particular context by very particular people for very particular objectives. And this is what we're going to be talking about today. How do we recognize those ideas, those norms in particular contexts, and what we do to resist them, to change them? So should I pass on the mic to each one of the panelists so you can introduce yourselves?
Hi, everybody. My name is Noemi Esparza. I am a trial lawyer. I've been handling personal injury cases for plaintiffs for about 7 years practicing, but I've been in that environment as a clerk before that for about 10 years. Before that, I worked in the legislature in Sacramento, but certainly the past 10 years being in the plaintiff's injury trial lawyer work, I've been working in a predominantly white male arena. So when we talk about stereotypes and things that play into my world and how it works and the limitations, that's certainly something that I've been dealing with for the past 10 years. So anyway, in my spare time, I like to dance too. But I don't get a lot of spare time because I have 2 kids and I'm taking care of my mom who's ill, but in my practice, it takes a lot of time. Thank you so much.
Go.
Hi, everyone. I'm Wayne Sutton. I'm the co-founder of Change the Catalyst and the Tech Inclusion Conference. Excited to be here, humble to be here. I want to thank Micah for inviting me. But I'm also a sub for my co-founder and fiance, Melinda Epler, who was originally supposed to be on this panel, but she's in Minneapolis speaking, so we do tag team. So my background, if you hear the Southern accent, originally from North Carolina, moved to the Bay Area about 5 years ago. So I'm a serial entrepreneur. I created 2 incubator accelerators focused on underrepresented tech founders here in Silicon Valley in San Francisco. Since moving here, my big kind of what got me into this space is as a tech entrepreneur from North Carolina, the data came out in 2011 from CB Insights that 1% of tech startups are founded by an underrepresented individual. And they actually, the data in 2011 was actually skewed because they grouped African Americans, Latinos together. So when the data came out, it really was less than 1% tech founders are tech companies are founded by underrepresented individuals, and then the data is even less than that in terms of venture capital and angel investors. So that's where my passion and my work has been a lot in terms of working with underrepresented startups. How can we create more underrepresented founders? And then in 2014, when the tech companies released their diversity numbers, Google and other companies, so forth, people were like, oh, who's that black guy who's talking about diversity in tech or underrepresented tech founders? And then so myself and Melinda also, we started getting invited to all these roundtables and workshops around the lack of diversity in the workforce. That led to a series of meetings and other roundtables, and we basically saw a core problem where the industry was not collaborating or sharing resources around the lack of diversity in tech. Then we created a Tech Inclusion Conference, and Michael was one of our speakers at our last event and our first event also. So I'm excited to be here.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm Soledad Antelada. I'm from Spain. I moved to the Bay Area in 2010, which is like 7 years already. So I'm a computers engineer. I'm a cybersecurity engineer. I work at Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory, which is the Department of Energy, which is a National Scientific Research Center. And that's about it. I mean, I think the reason that I'm here in this kind of panel is because I'm actually breaking the norm in a way that I'm in a very strongly aggressive male-dominated field, because it's not only IT, but it's cybersecurity, which is within IT, the field that you surely are not going to find any women. So I'm the only woman in my team. I'm not only the only woman, I'm the first woman ever. So I work with a group of people that are very well known for their country. It's like a high-tech, very high-level group of people, very well known for their contributions in the field at Berkeley, and I'm there as the only woman, so I have to overcome a lot of things. So I have to do my job plus the job of being a woman in the field, within my team, the job of trying to educate the guys on how do you work with a woman, for example. So I'm very happy about a couple things, like, for example, I'm getting conversations with them and with my manager, so we're trying, I'm going to talk about this later, but we're trying to do things. I'm also the founder of Girls Can Hack, which is an organization to encourage women to pursue a career in computer science, and especially in cybersecurity, and to act a little bit as a role model for them, so they can follow my lead, basically. So that's it. Thanks.
So my name is Maria. I'm from Brazil. I'm founder of a consulting business called Praxis. And we are in the market for almost 10 years, more than 10 years, actually. I think that's the reason I'm here today, because, as you know, Brazilian market can be very hard. We offer sustainability, corporate social responsibility, community building, and social impact strategy and operations for large organizations. And I moved to San Jose 9 months ago, and I joined Kiva in the global engagement team as well. And I'm part of Women Entrepreneur Network in Brazil with more than 40,000 women, so I'm trying to connect everything that's going on here in Silicon Valley with them in Brazil. There is a huge gap, so thanks for having me here today.
Great, thank you all, and welcome. Let's start our conversation with this first question. We got her.
Is that somebody virtually? Why don't you start the questions and we'll deal with the technology.
Okay. So our first question is, what are the stereotypes that you've observed in your industry, and how do you deal with them? How do you overcome it? Who would like to answer this question first? Naomi?
So, as I mentioned earlier, I practice in a predominantly older white male arena, and I'm also a mother. So that complicates everything because my time is very limited. And I also got started a little bit later, so a lot of the women that are my age have been practicing longer. And the stereotypes are still that, you know, the women, because we have kids, we can't handle as much of the load as the men can. We have other needs, and so what often happens is that they end up limiting my choices. You know, the folks that my boss or the partners end up thinking that, well, she's not going to be able to go out of town on that case because she's got kids, or she's not going to want to go try the case in LA because she's got kids. And I had to have that conversation when I even got a hint that that was the thought. I had to have a conversation and say, hey, that's my choice to make, not yours. If you can't assume that that's not the case, because I will go in a minute. You know, that's just a choice that I make, that I sacrifice sometimes my time with my kids, but that's my choice. And for them to limit or assume that I don't want to do that is not fair for me, because then that is also going to hinder my experience. And the folks that get these cases and try these cases, they get those opportunities and that experience, and then they get ahead of me in terms of growth and development and reputation. So, you know, just to start off, I mean, there's a ton of examples, but that's one of them, is the assumption that as a woman, because we're mothers or because we want to have kids, we're not going to be able to handle the same as my male counterparts, when it's usually the opposite, because we just handle so much, we're used to it, we get, that's what we're hardwired to do, and we just do it, and they just don't realize that.
Thank you, Naomi. Any of the other panelists would like to? Wayne? Maria?
Yeah, so in my industry, consulting in Brazil, that time was most dominated by men. So, and I was the new kid on the block with 24, and I had a son, and I have a son as well. He was a little. So I tried to overcome that by finding key sponsors in my network to support me, and most of them were women. And by having the opportunity to present my service and make them successful, I built my portfolio, and by word of mouth, have new clients. So that's how I did it. But the sad thing for me, and I wasn't expect that, it was the main stereotype was among my family and friends, because they expect me to be a housewife and a mother. So my main responsibility was not at all related to the business and the mission I decided to go after. So even today, I'm 10 years in the market. I have solid revenue. I have employees. I wrote 3 books. For some of them, they don't recognize me as a successful businesswoman. So stereotypes are always, for me, is always a thing that I have to overcome and keep going.
Thank you. I don't use the word hate often. I don't like it, but there's two things I really despise. There's stereotypes and double standards. And it is systematically rooted in our society, in our culture. And as a black man, the stereotypes that I face is not saying that I'm not comparing mine to yours, but I'm just going to speak just for mine, is that, we are thugs, we are educated, we sports, we entertainers, we song, we dance, we comedians, we are not intellectual engineers capable of launching a successful unicornish type startup. But that's the culture, the environment that I live in tech. And have to overcome those stereotypes, I had to constantly tell myself that I can prove them wrong. I can get access to anyone. I can, connect with billionaires, millionaires. I can launch a tech product. I can do everything else they can do. I haven't accomplished all those goals, but what I realized is that with those stereotypes, to overcome them, I had to constantly tell myself, it's not me, it's them. And that's their problem that they have to overcome. Now, by still living in this society, in this world, in this process, this system in tech that we have created, that Silicon Valley and the Bay Area has created, so how do I overcome those stereotypes? I work on just being the best I can be and be successful, and that sounds so cliche, but then also learning how to overcome them. How can I educate myself and educate and empower others to be successful? And once I learned the system in terms of how things are, what is perceived success in the Bay Area and in tech, then I started to do my best to help create networks and educate and empower others to learn it faster than I did, so they won't have the same hurdles and obstacles that I faced as when I first moved out here and I got in tech.
So, the stereotypes in my field are like, first of all, you need to be a boy to do it. Otherwise, it's like, what the heck are you doing here, right? So that's the main thing. It's also like, there's basically no women at all. So it's a normal thing. I think it's normal for anybody to think like, wow, there's a woman in the room, it's like. The other thing is like, it's a particularly like, kind of social, I mean, the people that works in cybersecurity are supposed to be, I don't think that's true 100%, but mostly are supposed to be like not very socially developed, or more of night owls in front of the computer all the time, that kind of thing. That can be the case. It's often the case. It's not always, but for sure, I'm not the profile. So in terms of overcoming the stereotype, I don't think I'm trying, but I don't think I'm doing it because it's pretty hard. I don't think I'm gonna do it ever in my lifetime because it's hard. For example, inside my team, I can do some progress, but the moment I'm out, I'm exposed again. So if people don't know you or whatever, so it's pretty hard. And I'm working more to see that change in the next generations, but I don't think it's gonna happen in mine, actually.
Thank you so much. So it's really interesting to see the wide gamma of stereotypes that all the members of this panel have to face on a day-to-day basis. And like you have all said, it's like overwhelming. It's like a whole system. But one thing that I hear in common is you do one step at a time. You speak, you say, hey, don't make these decisions for me. You write your books. You live your own profile and hope somebody watches. You make the best you can, knowing that you can do a lot more than people are expecting of you. So that we take these small steps, one at a time. But probably the most important thing is watch the words, like successful businesswoman, like cybersecurity that already attached to a certain idea, we must not take those for granted. We must question them, just ourselves, right? So that is not so oppressive. So moving on to the second question, how do we build the new social norm of women's economic empowerment? In other words, how can we start to make those changes? Anybody wants to start?
So I think the most important. There's multiple ways. I think you have many ideas, but I think the most important thing, or one of the most important things, is to play by example. So act as a role model, right? So people see you doing things and they will think that they can do it too. So I think that's very, very important. So it can make a very small inspiration for one person. It can make such a big difference, in my opinion, and also in my experience, because it has happened to me, and I can see I could do it for someone else, So I think.
Excellent. Yeah. Maria?
Yes. So, yeah, as she said, it's a complex question, and there are many ways to answer. But I think 3 pillars are very important to any kind of empowerment. One of them is about culture. If we don't have a society that treats us as equal as men or support us in any way, it's not possible to be empowered and to have a business and to study and act as leaders. The second pillar, I think, it's education. We have to make sure that women and girls have access to high-quality education and in a safe environment. And the third one, I think, is increase access to capital and opportunity. So once we have a cultural background that supports us, once we have education, we have to access capital and opportunities. As I said, in my case, it was really important to have women supporting me as sponsors, to introduce me to my new partners, my new clients. This is something that I'm trying to do for many women right now in Brazil and here in Silicon Valley as a global engagement supporter at Kiva's team. So I think this is a good way to discuss that.
I think part of that is also supporting each other and identifying other people that you think could use your help. Because I know, for example, I've been very lucky in finding folks that believe in me. I mean, out of all the people that I've come across in my journey of becoming, a trial lawyer and working where I work, there's been a very small number of people that believed in me and that have helped me and that have opened doors for me. And there's been a lot of people that shut me down, don't think I can handle it just because I'm a female, I'm Latina, I speak Spanish, so I'm not that smart. And the handful of people that have been supportive and believed in me have been incredible. And whenever I can, that I see somebody else who's coming up, who's less experienced than me, especially if it's a woman or a woman of color, I take the time to try to help them the same way that people have helped me. And because I can't tell you, the people that have helped me, they've been men. And I can't believe that there haven't been more women that have reached out to me. So I think it's important for me, I try to reach out to other women and help them up, because I think that's the only way that we're really going to be successful, is when we help each other.
Agree with everything that's been said. I would add, one is give Micah and the team a hand for putting this event off tonight. something I like to suggest is that everyone, if we continue to support events like this, and then everyone continue to tell their story about their experience tonight. Everything's not going to be perfect, things happen, but tell the good stuff. Tell just what you learned. If everyone wanted to write a Medium article about 3 things that they learned from this event tonight, think about the social reach and the impact that will have in everyone's culture and everyone's network. Just do that. 3 things you learned tonight. So continue to tell the story of education and events like this, and look at, I also like to suggest, look at new funding models for women who want to start technology-focused business. We're in the Bay Area, we're in Silicon Valley, venture capital, angel, that's how it works here. It's a very capitalist system. It is not for everybody. A piece of advice I give a lot of early stage underrepresented founders is that you have to ask yourself, are you creating a venture-backed business or an angel business or a small business? Most don't think about that. They think, oh, I'm gonna go raise some angel capital, I'm gonna go pitch to the venture capitalists and raise some money, and so you gotta look at new funding models.
Do you want to add something?
No, I'm fine.
Can I just add something really quick? And just because it prompted me from what you said, I think one of the big takeaways that I've learned is do not be afraid to ask. I went through this leadership academy that is organized by our lobbying group for trial lawyers. And one exercise that we had to do was about fundraising. And we had to do this exercise, and it was really hard for me to ask. Because I'm not, I think that's typical for a lot of women, is we don't like to ask. We just do things ourselves. And this was asking for money. So I said, you know what, I'm going to embrace this challenge, and I'm going to do it. And I just asked people that I never thought would give. And they gave, and I raised the most money because I said, I'm not going to be afraid. Who cares? If they say no, they say no. But this goes along with, I don't have my own business, but I would think the same thing applies. Don't be afraid to ask, because I know people have asked me, and I've said yes, because I know them, I like them, and I believe in it. So just don't be afraid to ask, just do it, because the worst thing that can happen is rejection, and you were there, it gets you to square one anyway, and you were already there.
Thank you, Naomi. This is a great segue into the third question, which is, how is it that we play into these stereotypes, that we actually self-sabotage our own path? Anybody wants to start?
So this is a very interesting question for me, because I almost said no to this opportunity today because of this self-sabotage thing. So I think one thing, we are too hard on ourselves. We have a lot of inner critic voices inside of us. And sometimes we lose opportunities because of this inner critic. So I just repeated a lot of times to myself, you impacted like more than 20,000 people in Brazil. You have a 18-years-old boy going to college. You have a 10 years business going on there, and you have a job here in San Francisco. So go there and speak your funny accent English and spread your message, and don't let this inner critic win the battle. So I think
I might add that inner critic is also being informed by the stereotypes. So by resisting the inner critic, you are resisting the stereotypes.
I think,
Go ahead.
I think that happens to almost every one of us here. At least it happens to me all the time. It used to happen to me more, but I'm also kind of a masochist, so I will go and do it anyway, if I suffer like forever. But yeah, I will do things like that, even if I suffer. But I was giving a lot of thought about this question, actually, because it's actually things that I become aware that I'm doing for example, in meetings. So I'm not that assertive as I am supposed to be, especially when I'm trying to get my word out in front of 8 guys that are talking like very aggressively, for example. So I would just like be quiet, or not. I don't know. I'm like afraid of like being too aggressive. I don't know, things like that, which is actually very bad for me, right? So that kind of thing has played me down a little bit in my career. Also because I'm not, my profile is, my character is not to be that aggressive on a meeting, so it's not the way I am. But the game is different. So the other thing is like I'm gonna be 40 at the end of the year, so so I have engaged in a lot of things, like for developing myself a little bit more in this sense. So, and one of them is like I'm trying to get to my 40s, like with a big sense of that I'm not taking any more bullshit. So, yeah. This is this is actually very true. I had a meeting with my boss today in the morning because for the first time in my life last week, I walked out of a meeting. So yeah. So I'm fed up. It's like I don't want to be ignored anymore, because I've been already in this field for 15 years. So I think I'm gonna be done with the self-sabotage, or I'm trying to, so yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So I hate to interrupt, this has been a great conversation, but I don't think we're gonna make it to the last question in time, and I want to allow some audience participation with this panel. So could we get a couple hands from the audience? Does anybody have a question of the panelists? Anybody? We'll bring a mic to you. I do double team here, all right.
I have a couple things. One is a nod to Soledad. We met at an event last year, and because of that, my niece has added cybersecurity to her criminal law major. And because of space like Girls Can Hack, it gives her a place to go in and feel safe and check out what other women are doing. And she's very quiet. She kind of actually fits the profile better than you of the cybersecurity person. But that's not what I was going to bring up. I was the only woman commercial construction superintendent in Chicago when I was 23. And my first week at work was the scariest week of my entire life. I was down in the south side of Chicago with all basically Sicilian guys in their 70s on my crew. And that first day, I wanted to cry. I still have the emotion. I wanted to call my dad. And I was the only woman in my major for a while in construction management. And that had its own thing. But what I was going to relay, that how I succeeded in all of those things and the companies I've started since, is so many women I watched try to fit in with the men. And what I found is if you can educate them on our femininity and how we think and how we work and how we can bring more to the table, then we can be ourselves more, we can be more comfortable, we're a better member of the team, and then they're more comfortable with us because they don't think we're trying to be men. And so I think in my now 24 years of working, that's the biggest lesson I've learned, is just to really tell women to continue to be yourself, be strong, and yes, you have to interrupt and walk out of the room periodically. And luckily I have a big, deep voice. I'm able to quiet a room really fast when I need to, but I've allowed myself to be more and more feminine as the years have progressed. So that would be my only addition.
Fantastic.
One more. We have one more. I saw your hand first. There you go.
Yes, I just wonder, in a male competitive environment, dominated like the one you live and succeed, do you feel you have to compromise with, how do you respond to pressure in a competitive environment? Do you feel you have to compromise with your femininity, or you can always be yourself, or sometimes you have to adapt to a more male way of responding? How is it in your experience?
Are you asking Soledad, do you want to,
Probably for any of the female
or
panelists.
anybody wants to take a stab?
So I try to be myself mostly, but I can recognize that I had to compromise sometimes. Like for example, in the way I'm responding to emails. I mean, if I send an email, I'm not gonna get a reply sometimes the same way if I'm a man. So sometimes I have to think twice. It depends on the person I'm sending the email. You know how I'm gonna say this or that. Yeah, sometimes I give it a little more thought than other times, but I don't go just like, boom, I write the email. This is me, you know, because I know sometimes that can give me more work that I need at that particular moment, for example. I don't know, that's an example that I can think of. Anyway, I'm trying to be myself now from now on, so they're gonna have to deal with that. So,
Right on.
Well, I think time is up. This has been fantastically interesting. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Can you give a round of applause? Thank you so much.